Hi everyone. So the title of my research paper is Politics and Prisoners, How Using Hostage Diplomacy Affects International Cooperation. The topic of my research paper is how hostage diplomacy in the accompaniment of unilateral ideologies is about the obtainment of power and hegemonic influence in the international system for states. Hostage diplomacy is defined as the practice of the imprisonment of foreigners being held under the pretense of breaking a law for the use of political leverage or to apply pressure against other countries when engaging in global affairs. So the first section of my research paper focuses on international extradition treaties and how they operate. The main definition of an international extradition treaty is the practice of one state following the correct protocols that are instated to surrender an alleged criminal to another state that has jurisdiction over the criminal charges. These treaties can be either bilateral or multilateral, but what should be noted is that there's no third party international institution overseeing making sure that international extradition treaties go according to plan. It's all governed by the states that are involved in the treaties. This leads to dangerous territory because relations between states can decline over time, or a state can begin to start acting in their own unilateral interests, meaning the contents of an extradition treaty can be ignored. This leads to the employment of hostage diplomacy. From a theoretical perspective, I used constructivism to help understand why countries may ignore the contents of an extradition treaty, or why, if a state doesn't have a treaty like between each other, why a state may not engage in diplomatic negotiation to reach a mutual agreement. So constructivism sees that people make society and society makes people. In this instance, the society here is the international system, and the people are the states that are participatory agents in that system. And within that system, there's choices on whether or not to follow or ignore the social or legal norms or rules set in place. So when creating an extradition treaty between countries, countries kind of have a choice now whether or not to strengthen or weaken international bonds with each other to follow or not follow those legal norms of an extradition treaty, which is in place. Next, in my research paper, I look at two separate cases of hostage diplomacy being used as political leverage, as well as to showcase dominance against other countries. In the first case, I look at the case of American WNBA player Brittany Griner, who was arrested in February of 2022 and convicted in August of 2022 by Russian authorities of possessing cannabis oil in her luggage. She was sentenced to 9 years in a Russian penal colony. During the same time period, the United States allyship with Ukraine led to the Americans to openly condemn Russian President Vladimir Putin's decision to invade Ukraine in February of 2022. It can be comprehended that Russia is engaging in hostage diplomacy to show its dominance over its longtime adversary and occasional ally, the United States. Currently, Russian President Putin is using Griner for political leverage to influence the United States' current standing over the Russia invading Ukraine, as well as attempting to try to showcase its dominance in the world system to show that Russia is not a country to be trifled with. Then I look at the case of the two Michaels and the Meng Wanzhou affair, which is a diplomatic conflict between Canada, China, and the United States. So in December of 2018, the RCMP arrested Meng Wanzhou, the CFO of Chinese tech company Huawei in Vancouver, British Columbia. This detainment was carried out on behalf of a New York court to extradite Wanzhou to the United States on multiple charges of fraud. 9 days after Wanzhou's detainment in Canada, Canadians Michael Korvig and Michael Spavor were detained, charged, and convicted of espionage, a political offense in China. The two Michaels spent over 1,000 days in a Chinese prison. Emerging powers like China challenging established powers like the United States creates a competitive environment within the international system. China wants to obtain hegemonic influence, which is needed to survive in and influence against like global governance by using hostage diplomacy. Despite it being two Canadian citizens, it still puts the United States in a difficult position because they want to prosecute Wan Zhao, but Canada is also a close ally, and the two Michaels cannot be left in prison. China is a rising state and is encountering more power, which leads to rising ambitions. And without that power, China trying to complete its agenda in any area can be interfered with or halted with. So engaging in hostage diplomacy with these two countries kind of puts itself out there as it is a dominant state and it's taking an offensive stance. And from this perspective, you can kind of see it from a neo-realist perspective in like these circumstances of trying to survive. But to conclude, the purpose of this research paper was to analyze how when states use hostage diplomacy for unilateral purposes, it is to strive for hegemonic influence and the domination within the international system. It can be suggested that hostage diplomacy in combination with other practices is used to gain political leverage, and emerging countries will use this based on the results seen in Russia and China. If states are unable to cooperate and collaborate with each other, the idea of the global liberal order and global governance falls apart. Furthermore, the competitive nature of the international system will persist with states trying to unilaterally achieve dominance, and the continuance of hostage diplomacy will escalate the lengths countries will go to complete their agendas. That is all. I look forward to hearing your questions and comments on my research paper. Have a great day. Bye.